45 minutes approximately. Okay.
Running covers.
Good, if I'm going short?
Yeah.
Can we have the first speaker then from BIC, Manuel, I believe? Sorry, I thought there was going to be a speech. Let me know when you're ready. Okay.
Is it a boy or a girl? That's often the first question asked when a baby is born. The response to this question is often determined by the external genitals of the baby. Most parts of society, including many in the medical community, see only two possibilities, girl or boy, female or male. When a doctor who helps deliver the baby sees a penis, the baby is said to be a boy. If they see a vulva, it's said to be a girl. Either way, the determination of a baby's gender is called sex assigned at birth. Sometimes someone's biologically sex is wrongly referred as gender. However, these terms are very different. Our sex assigned at birth, sometimes referred to as gender, is based on how someone else sees our body and does not take in consideration how we see ourselves as a whole person. That's why gender cannot be defined biologically. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and members of the opposing team. My name is Manuel, and today Ava, Imogen, and I will be putting forth the argument that gender cannot be defined biologically. Either way, as I said, sex assigned at birth is sometimes referred as our gender. However, it is how someone else sees our bodies and does not take in consideration how we see ourselves as a whole person. For some people, their sex assigned at birth may be distinctly different from their gender identity. Gender is how a person identifies how they see themselves and their internal sense of being male, female, both of these, or another gender. Most people whose sex assigned at birth is female grow up to identify as female, and most whose sex assigned at birth is male will grow up to identify as male. Some babies are born with external genitals, internal organs, or chromosomes that don't fit the typical definitions of male and female. This is known as intersex. Intersex people are born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit boxes of male and female. As these people grow up, these people will still have the internal sense of who they are, or a gender identity that will be able to describe later in their lives.
So you are saying that they will have this internal sense of what gender they are when they grow up.
Yeah.
However, this is already shown by the neurology in their brains of what they will feel they identify as. What do you have against that?
Yes, there's been psychological research. I've done that in my against speech. However, as my team will mention later, most of the psychological research that has been done is not valid in most cases. For many people around the world, their sex assigned at birth, girl or boy, doesn't match their gender identity or the internal sense of who they see themselves to be. An example of these are transgender people, where it refers to a man or a woman who was assigned a gender at birth, but now doesn't match how they feel about themselves internally. Sometimes a person's gender identity or the way they feel or see themselves doesn't fit neatly into the binary definitions our society has, female or male. People who feel this way may identify themselves as genderqueer, gender fluid, or gender non-binary. People who identify as genderqueer or gender non-binary may express a combination of masculinity and femininity, or neither, in their gender expression. That's why, if you search up gender in the dictionary, explain it as male, female, or another sex when considered with reference to social and cultural differences and not fully biological ones. Some psychologists argue that biological factors have a cue role in gender, like Williamson Peel in 2008. What he did was get primates and humans and basically hormones, they determined if they like Barbies or Hot Wheels. However, this was ecologically invalid because it was children that didn't know what to choose, and primates that are very different to humans.
Let me know when you're ready.
Good morning, honorable judges, timekeeper, members of the opposing team, and distinguished guests. First of all, thank you, judges, for bringing us the opportunity to debate in the finals. Today, we're here to debate the crucial motion, gender identity cannot be defined biologically. My team and I will be arguing against the motion. I, Laura Yompard, will be explaining how biology defines your gender identity using neurology and genetics. The second speaker, Sofia Balou, will be going more on the medical aspect of the argument. And our final speaker, Leila Rabidu, is providing some indisputable scientific facts about the neurological findings in the brains of transgender people. Our position in this debate is that we believe that gender identity can be defined biologically. We are not saying that your gender has to be the same as the sex you were born with. What we are arguing and what we are going to prove to you is that what determines your gender identity is your brain. Brain activity is neurology, and neurology is an aspect of biology. Your gender identity is defined biologically, regardless of its correlation to your body. We can relate transgenderism and gender identity to genetics. The biological essentialist argument that attempts to invalidate transgenderism and gender identity is based on the premise that a male brain is always born into a male body, and that a female brain is always born into a female body. But we all know that's not correct. When we get to understand biology, in particular genetics, endocrinology, and neurology, we will be able to prove that and fully comprehend why gender identity can be defined biologically. Research right now is limited, but research has already proven to us that biology does define your gender identity, and the studies are just getting clearer and better. Let me simply show you how biology demonstrates your gender identity. In different studies that use MRIs to take images of your brain, as people perform different tasks, show that transgender people's brains tend to look like the gender they identify with. Isn't that amazing? How science can exhibit those things and therefore explain how our brains work. In a world that still misunderstands, discriminates against, and victimizes people that feel they have a different gender identity to their body, the science will be able to prove why they feel a certain way and explain it to those that do not understand. Yes.
Could you not argue that in the psychological tests that have been done, that there are many social and environmental factors that affect the results and the outcome of the studies?
Yes, I understand your point, but we believe that psychology is a branch of biology. Thank you. So, because people do not understand others and they try to invalidate other people's feelings, but with biology, they will not be able to deny the science. So how can someone say that biology does not determine your gender identity when biology is the study of living organisms divided into different categories such as anatomy, morphology, behavior, and many more that can show to you what your gender is? Why would we go against it instead of embracing it? Your biology, your neurons, your hormones, your brain to the simplest is what determines your gender identity, because you are biology. Thank you.
That label has never done anything for me except for dictate what I can or cannot do. Lucy Jane, Iron Ribbon. This book deals with questions regarding gender identity and gender stereotypes, highlighting the often damaging effects these stereotypes, roles, and predetermined fates can have on a person and their future. Lucy Tin doesn't feel fully like a woman, yet feels a need to twist herself to become one, as fighting against the stereotypes of her society is far too hard. This commentary is especially interesting as it is a reflection of the world today. We have the option of two genders, and for many people, whichever one you are is solely reliant on the reproductive organs you were born with. This causes many of today's youths who feel like they fall outside of these two binary terms to suffer the feelings of depression, self-hate, anxiety, and denial. I myself and many others, due to the majority of people being cis, will never understand what it is like to go through something as painful as waking up and not seeing yourself in the mirror. No one, especially a child, should ever be subjected to this, particularly when it is easy to prevent someone going through this, through normalising their feelings, practising acceptance, and altogether just being understanding. A person's gender identity is ever-growing and changing, and in contrary to popular belief, gender is not categorisable. Gender identity is a spectrum, of which you will land somewhere on, or nowhere. This is confusing and hard to get your head around, especially when you've been brought up with solely two genders, and that's fine. But what isn't fine is trying to place people into boxes they don't fit into, to try and make yourself more comfortable. As at the end of the day, how someone wishes to define their gender affects no one but themselves. Your gender identity is purely personal. It's a thought process, a topic you take your time thinking over before coming to some sort of decision.
You have a question?
Whether it's because...
Wouldn't it be demeaning to say that it's just something you think over and decide one day, you wake up one morning and decide, when it's actually in your biology, it's rooted, that's how you were when you were born, it is who you are?
Well, as I was saying, it's not something you come to, or I might be able to say, it's not something you just wake up one day and know. It's something that you come to terms with after struggling against many of the social stereotypes that we face in today's society. Thank you. Your gender identity is purely personal. It's a thought process, a topic you take your time thinking over before coming to some sort of decision. Whether it's that you fit into some sort of binary, your gender identity is fluid, or that you don't want to define anything at all. Trying to define someone's gender based on their biology is impossible, as you cannot take someone's personal feelings and thoughts and tell them that you know them better than they know themselves. We as a society have limited ourselves to only two genders. You can argue otherwise, but still we only have male and female bathrooms. On forms you can only select male or female. We as a society have the option of two genders, and for some reason we have decided that that is the way it has always been, yet it hasn't. During the Incan Empire, one of their gods was dual-gendered, and the shamans and attendants formed the sacred.
I think that is not true. For example, on identifications and passports, there is an option for a gender-neutral one. So you're actually thinking in the past rather than thinking now.
Well, often on forms that you take, you'll have the option of female, male, or other. And I think that's very demeaning that you have to select another gender rather than the gender you actually are. The shamans and attendants who performed the sacred rituals for the god were seen as having a third gender. Currently in Asia, a group of people, the beauties, have 5 different terms for when they are discussing a person's gender. Yet we in Western society like to pretend that there are only 2 genders, and that's all there ever has been. It's an argument or excuse I hear all the time, as people try to force others to conform to the ideals of an incredibly restrictive outlook on life. Today we are here to discuss whether we can determine someone's gender identity based on their biology. I don't think it's even a question when I tell you that you can't. Someone's gender identity is about how they feel inside and nothing more. No part of their biological makeup can change or alter how they feel. If I were to be asked what gender I identify with, I would say woman straight away, as I know that no other term feels as right as that one does. Yes, my gender identity matches my sex. But that doesn't change the innate feeling I have, the knowledge that I am a woman. And this wouldn't change even if my sex did. Thank you.
opposing team. My name is Sophia Balu, and I'll be discussing how and why we can classify gender as biological. The other team and the motion has tried to twist your ideology into thinking they are more progressive, more modern, more accepting with their argument. However, we are not oppressing, marginalizing, or ignoring anyone's gender identity. In fact, we are giving you scientific evidence in order to help back up the rights to the identity of their choice. We believe that the perspective that your gender identity cannot be defined biologically is simply being ignorant and harmful. With advanced scientific research now more widely available, we know that it is undermining to say that identifying your gender is simply just a thought and nothing deeper. You wouldn't say that your gender is something that means nothing to you and just something your brain makes up, would you? No, you wouldn't. It's your biology that determines everything, from the way you think, feel, act, and dress. We are saying that gender identity is defined and acknowledged by biology and isn't just a social construct. Biology is everything, from the millions of skin cells on the tip of your finger to the essential parts of your neurons that impact your social cognition, self-perception, and emotional processing. The parts of our brain that decide how we feel about our identities. Because our identity is who we are, and in the end, biology is you. Now, contrary to popular belief, not all scientific research related to gender studies is trying to tear down people's identities. The most advanced
Two jobs today.
The most advanced research by some of the world's leading specialists is trying to help us better understand the unique and real transgender experience. In order to do this, scientists have to look at three main subjects: genetics, neurobiology, and endocrinology. In the Medical University of Georgia, a group of medical scientific experts have undertaken research that many people who have experienced gender dysphoria or were in their own body have actually had high levels of traces of the opposite hormone in regard to their birth sex. Scientists have found that pre-transition trans women have estrogen receptors in their brain. This will be concrete biological evidence of the incongruence that transgender individuals experience, because their brain indicates they are one sex and their body is another. We also have the evidence on the neurological side that my teammate Laura has already touched on. At the National Center of Biotechnology and Information, run by the respected Dr. J. Graham Thiessen, was designed to shed further light on the question whether the brains of transgender individuals resemble their birth sex or their gender identity. For this purpose, they analyzed a sample of the brain patterns of 24 cisgender men, 24 cisgender women, and 24 trans women, after watching a stimulating video. The studies of the brain scans showed that the activity between the transgender women and the cisgender women were almost identical, whilst the men were different. This is direct evidence that goes to show that even down to your brain patterns, your gender identity is with you. While this is a small overview, the science is clear and conclusive. Sex is not binary. Transgender people are influenced by their genetic makeup. Their gender identity is defined by biology.
Okay.
Gender identity refers to our sense of who we are and how we see and describe ourselves. Gender is made up of a combination of various different factors, most of which are completely socially influenced. These factors are identity, attraction, biological sex, and expression. It's important to understand the difference between sex and gender here. Sex is the trait that determines whether a sexually reproducing animal or plant produces male or female gametes and therefore can be defined biologically. However, biology because behaviour and characteristics of different binary genders are learned in social situations. From the moment we're born, and even before, our sex is defined biologically based on what reproductive organs we have. And immediately, society links our sex to a gender. Simple, right? The baby has female reproductive organs and therefore her gender will be female. After this assumption is made, the social stereotypes swarm around the child as she's brought up to be female. I'm sure you can all imagine this, because I'm sure you've all experienced it. I can vividly remember when I was about 5 or 6 years old, walking into H&M Kids with my dad, looking for a new pair of boots. We passed the boys section and I spotted a great pair of plain brown boots. Just what I was looking for. But I'm a girl, so naturally I went to look at the ones in the girls section. Frills, feathers and fluff were on every pair of boots. I told my dad about the ones in the boys section and how they were so much better. And he completely agreed and bought them. They were the ones I'd been looking for all along. I was very happy with them and wore them all the time, but never once told anyone that they were from the boys section because, well, I'm a girl. Defining one's gender based on their sex can lead to all sorts of divisions and uncomfortableness because people are brought up being identified by their genitalia rather than a combination of different factors that make up gender. Gender cannot be based on biological sex because there are so many cases where the instant link between biological sex and gender has firstly been wrong and secondly caused huge amounts of uncomfortableness. Gender dysphoria, a term that describes a sense of unease that a person may have because of their mismatch between their biological sex and how they actually see themselves. It poses many questions and confusion for both people experiencing it and doctors who are needed to help. However, there is one question that is more prominent than all the others. Where does gender dysphoria come from? Well, the NHS has distinctly said that it is unclear where gender dysphoria comes from. But it is clear that gender dysphoria is not a psychological disorder. Psychological disorders have a biological component caused by genetic predisposition.
Previously, you have said that your gender is how you feel, but you're going on to saying that it's how other people see you, and it's preconceived ideas.
It's right. So your gender is made up of a combination of different factors, some of which are biological, but most of which are socially influenced, and that will cause you to see yourself as I say, psychological disorders have a biological component caused by a genetic predisposition, as well as a socially and environmentally caused factor. Therefore, gender dysphoria can be classified as a psychological disorder, as it is unknown where it comes from, and whether or not it has a biological component or an environmentally influenced component. There is no biological sex to determine the gender non-binary, and gender fluid people switch between male and female on a regular basis, depending on how they want to express themselves at a certain point in their life. I'll leave you with one quote from someone who is anonymous experiencing gender dysphoria. I'm not trapped in my body, I'm trapped in other people's perceptions of my body. Thank you.
And lastly, Laura, please.
My name is Leila Rabdu, and today I'm going to discuss some social repercussions of this motion as well as explain some in-depth current research. With a more progressive mindset all around the world, trans people have never been more acknowledged. Behind the positive news, though, a darker picture emerges. Transgender people are some of the most persecuted, oppressed, and least protected people in our society. Should we stand for this? No, of course not. But clearly millions of people did stand for this. Trans people are criminalized in Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, South Sudan, the list goes on and on. In some countries, being trans is even punishable by death. But you may be asking, well, how does this link to the motion? Racism is also a big issue of discrimination, but many people argue it's not their fault. That's the way they were when they were born. It's the melanin in their skin. This is accurate. However, the same people argue it's okay to discriminate against trans people and gender non-conforming people because it was their choice. It's not just their choice. It's biological, and it's just as established as the color of your skin. This means that your gender identity is biological. However, many people ignore the science behind this, so I will give you concrete evidence you cannot ignore. It all leads back to the biology of the brain. Another quote by Dr. J. Graham Thiessen, the esteemed medical expert, whom my teammate Sophia already mentioned, is, once someone has a male or female brain, they have it, and they are not going to change it. The goal of treatments like hormone therapy and surgery is just to help a body more closely match where their brain already is. This is showing that it's not their choice. The hormones and surgery aren't to make them change genders, it's to make them fit closer to their true gender identity. Among the leaders in brain scan research is Ivanka Savic, a widely respected professor of neurology, and she has led some of the most pioneering research into gender identity. Her and her colleague published a series of studies stating that cerebral networks involved in own body perception in the context of self, especially 3 crucial parts of the brain, are different in individuals with GD, gender dysphoria, compared with cisgender people. But what does this mean? Firstly, the pregenital anterior cingulate cortex, you can see here, is an important midline structure involved in emotional processing. Meanwhile, the temporal partial junction is important in numerous aspects of social cognition. Lastly, the fusiform body areas, simply put, is the perception of people's bodies and how people interact.
Being that one of the key terms in the motion, how can that be defined biologically?
So you're saying that this is the expressions, all of these things that build up identity. Meanwhile, I just stated that all of these parts of the brain involved in expression and social cognition. So this is how you interact, this is how you are perceived by others, this is how you express yourself. All of it comes back to biology. Our society is built up by us, and we are biology. So biology and gender identity are intertwined. So it's thoughtless to ignore these scientific revelations that would give the spectrum of gender dysphoria people in society the rights they deserve. So don't ignore it. Embrace it. Thank you.
Right, teams, you have 2 minutes to formulate your final arguments.
You are correct. It is something we created in society. But the way we create it is with our collective minds, our brains. It is how we process. It is how we express. We made everything around us. How could it not be biology? Gender identity is a complex topic that couldn't possibly be summed up in 3 5-minute speeches. It is so much more vast and important than we could even fathom. That's why we are asking that, demanding that you open your eyes to the reality that is our gender identity. It is psychology and neurology past our understanding. We can understand and prove this basic statement though. Gender identity can be defined biologically. We are not tearing down people's gender identities. We are saying yes, they are valid, and furthermore, here is the science to prove that. Our argument may be new and eye-opening, but it should start to be widely accepted as it could change people's perspectives on gender identity. Who knows, it could even save lives. From trans to demigirl and demiboy, from cis to non-binary and agender, all of our gender identities are valid. All of our gender identities are real and true. It would be demeaning to dismiss this gender identity as just a feeling. It's not just a feeling. From the pregenital anterior cingulate cortex to the estrogen signaling pathways, we have shown time and time again, science proves our identities. Let's unite against this preconceived, distorted idea of non-conforming gender identity being invalid or unreal. Let's unite against all of the people saying that we can't be who we truly are. We may define society, but we cannot allow society to define us. Thank you.
The other team mentioned, I think one of their key points was that was about how our biology does affect being trans. And I think that's an incredibly fair point. But what I want to know is, where do they put non-binary people or gender fluid people who continuously fluctuate? Because during the entirety of their debate, I didn't hear one piece of information that validated their gender identities. And I think that's just really unfair and narrowing down. Speaker 2, you mentioned the study, but from what I know, it isn't actually ecologically valid, as participants might actually act differently whilst they are inside a lab and not outside society. You mentioned that gender is a social construct, but everything to do with our society is a social construct. The money we use, the houses we live in, all of it is socially constructed. The way this competition is socially constructed. So of course, social factors are going to have to play a huge role in our gender identity. You mentioned that biology is important for someone's gender identity, especially if you were talking about trans, and that's right, but environmental matters affect your biology. If you're happy, you're going to release serotonin, but why are you happy? The people you're around, the people you are socializing with. So therefore, the environmental factors, the social factors, have to affect gender identity. Gender identity means no biological factors. It mentions beliefs, personality traits, and expansion, but I don't see anything to do with biology there. I'd like to leave you with a quote from Judith Butler, a gender theorist. Masculine and feminine roles are not biologically fixed, but socially constructed. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much again to two magnificent teams debating an extremely interesting subject. We now have a grant for 15 minutes while the jury will be delivering on the first and second prizes here. They will be leaving off tonight with Mr. Paul Aubrey, I believe. And so would you all just take a 10-minute break and then we'll be back here. 10-minute break. Thank you.